Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Future Film Podcast. It's your host here, Robert Fitzhugh. This week, in order to escape the quarantine blues, we are speaking to two very talented filmmakers, the team behind the incredible The Spectacle. Spectacle is a film that played at this year's Dublin Smartphone Film Festival and has just won, as of in the last day or so, the Mobile Filmmakers International Festival for Best Film in Russia. So we're very excited to be able to talk to the filmmakers Ivo Nefis and Fustine Cross about making their film, the process that went into it. This episode podcast is brought to you by our sponsors SV Assets. So SV Assets, they make high-end optics and accessories for mobile phones, for photography and for filmmaking. You can imagine they make pretty quality lenses that come in this amazing little set, and I was very lucky to be able to be out the other day in the woods in isolation near my house playing around with them, and it's an exceptional lenses that they sell with really great cases, and they're really premium smartphone optics. So they pride themselves on being lenses that created by content creators for content creators. So this Swedish company have very kindly given us a discount code that friends of the pod can use in order to avail of their sweet products, and that code is Dublin25. So if you go to their website, which is SV Assets, info@svassets.se, and on checkout use the promo code Dublin25, you will get 25% off all their products, which is a pretty savage deal, and that is valid until the 1st of July. So get cracking and on with the pod. Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of the podcast. How you doing?
Good, and you?
Good, how are you?
Good. For anyone who's listening, I am speaking to Ivo, oh my god, I've forgotten already. Ivo Nefis and Fustine Cross. And they are the filmmakers and director and editor of the Spectacle, which was a film that was shown at this year's Dublin Smartphone Film Festival. And it was a film that I am very, very happy I showed. And I believe, Ivo, you had an email for me. It was quite a polarizing result that I got from people. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you, because it kind of split the audience down the middle, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. It was kind of an interesting outcome that came from it, and people definitely remembered it. It was one of the more memorable ones from the festival. But I just want to have you on the podcast just to chat a little bit about that. But I suppose it's probably best to get an idea about you guys. Where are you guys based at the moment?
Well, at the moment I'm living in Finland, in Helsinki.
Oh, nice.
Because I'm actually filmmaking, something that I do as a side project at the moment, and I'm actually a chemist by profession, so I work at the University of Helsinki.
Wow. So how did you? That's such a fascinating thing. You work in Helsinki, and you ended up doing filmmaking as a hobby, and you made a film in Belgium.
Yeah, but I originally studied filmmaking in Belgium, and after doing 4 years of that, I felt a bit that in the filmmaking course that I was following, we had to make a film like every semester. So that was sort of 2 films per year. And yeah. I think after 4 years, I felt a bit like I don't have anything to tell at the moment anymore. And I want to take a break to do something else. And I was always interested in science. So then I changed to that. And for the last 5 years, I've been working in science. First got my bachelor and master, and then now I'm doing a PhD in the University of Helsinki then.
And so you then went back and just kind of occasionally make films kind of as a hobby?
Yeah. So the nice thing about The Spectacle for me was that the previous films I made were often in the context of the filmmaking course. And This was one of the first films I made that was really separate from that course. So I didn't have a deadline to do it, but I really had to push myself to make it. And because normally it's like, I guess it's difficult to make a project like that when there's not something that pushes you or like a deadline that you have. So I was really happy that we were able to pull it together like that.
And how long did it, just kind of to focus on The Spectacle for a moment, how long did it take you to film that then and set that up and shoot it and get it all done?
Well, I was thinking about the story for quite some time, but I think really like from the moment that we started to write the screenplay was, I think, in the early 2018, so like January, okay. And then we shot in the summer of 2018.
Okay, and Fustine, your background, are you also dabbling in editing for fun, or and working full time, or is this your full time type of thing?
No, I'm a full-time editor.
Oh, cool.
I met Ivo during the time we were studying in Brussels filmmaking.
Yeah.
So I continued.
Okay.
Continued to do film and editing, and mostly short films of fiction. I did a lot of editing for them.
And how do you find? Because I find editing great. When I studied film, the one thing I never thought I'd be able to do is edit, because I thought I wouldn't have the concentration. And it turns out it's the one thing I love the most, and it's the thing I'm actually. That's why I was late today even doing this, is because I had headphones on and I was editing, because I just spend all my time editing. So I really like it. I find it very relaxing to do. Not subtitles. I hate doing subtitles, but everything else I find incredibly relaxing when I'm editing. So you're editing projects. Have you ever edited films, feature films, stuff like that, or is it all smaller scale stuff?
I've been working on feature films, yes, more documentary. I'm also myself a director.
Oh, nice.
And I'm quite versatile in the genre of editing that I'm doing, or filmmaking in general. I like to try even experimental, and as long as the filmmaking process is a big part of each project, I like to be part of it.
Okay, nice. So that's kind of cool. So here you guys are working up a storm. I wanted to speak a little bit about the spectacle, I suppose, because Ivo, you were saying you had the idea in the summer of. Well, you started filming in summer 2018. It's based on a true story, yes?
Yes, it's based on a true story that happened somewhere, I think, in 2014.
Yeah.
So I knew about. So maybe I should say a bit. So it's based on a true story of two girls that were 13 and 14 years old, and they tortured and murdered a vulnerable woman in her own house. And so throughout this whole event, this torture and murder, they sent their friends pictures and videos of what they were doing. And this thing that the aspect of them filming everything and sort of putting on a show for their friends, that was what really drew me into the story.
And did you then it's you just took that as a framework and built your own thing around it? It's only based on that idea, really, and then I'm assuming the character is all different, but it's for the most part it follows the same. I mean, because at one point in the film, for anyone who hasn't seen it, people leave suggestions to them to do things to the woman. Their friends leave comments and things like that, and they action them out, like kicker and stuff like that. Is that all elements that were added in, or did that actually happen during the real event?
There's what exactly happened during the real event is not much known, so there's a lot of things added. Like we tried to stay somewhat close to some things that happened, or like to really research what happened there, but it was like this aspect of the filmmaking that interested us the most, and it was not our purpose to make like an exact reconstruction of it, what in reality.
Go ahead.
It's also that even when I knew this story, I knew it for quite some time, but I didn't really, know how to approach this. But it was not until I read The Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord, which is also where the title comes from.
Yeah.
It's like a book where the author argues that we have so much omnipresence of images in our society that leads us to be sort of detached from reality. And that's something I really wanted to sort of focus on, this idea that these, not so much to say that the thing that these girls did, the torture and murder, was specifically done because of that, but that by this sort of image culture that we have, and you can get sort of loose from reality and its consequences, and by trying to put on a show, you can like extend your boundaries. And that was
okay. So that because I have so much to talk about in that regard. But but that's like, it's interesting. I suppose the decision at the end, that cut at the end, to reveal people looking, that's actual real footage, yes, the people looking at things online, or is that footage that you faked as well? Did you have to get permission from them, or did you just use it?
I certainly hope not.
No, because it really hammers the point home at the end when it cuts to essentially reaction videos of people watching everything and anything online. And I suppose, to get into the aspect of it, that was your first time. Had you shot on a phone before? I mean, obviously for a narrative purpose, it makes sense to shoot it on a phone. Had you used a phone before to film anything, or was that your first time?
I used the phone to shoot, just as never to do like a full film on it. I did some like shooting on film, but just for like experiments. I have some, like anamorphic lenses and that kind of thing for a smartphone, but never really, I didn't ever use it for like a short film.
Because one of the things that really it's very realistic. And I suppose that is the point, and it's very realistic to the point that and it weirdly has an audience member. It's so realistic, and because you're watching it in our case, you're watching it on a cinema screen, you almost become complicit in what you're looking at, and you become very, very uncomfortable. I suppose the idea was to shoot it on a phone to kind of bring you into that kind of mindset.
Yeah, but because that was really important for us, this concept that how I feel it is that, like, in a lot of things that we see today, that you see quite extreme events in a lot of things in cinema, but you see it from a certain distance often. Like a story that I often tell then is like of Ridley Scott, the director of Gladiator. Like, he was during the editing of Gladiator, he wanted to show some gruesome events, like, like somebody getting an axe to the face in the Gladiator arena.
Yeah.
Test audiences were repulsed by these graphic images. So he was discussing with his editor, like, how do we make this, how can we show this to an audience without them being repulsed? And they got to this whole editing where they just show a couple of frames of like the impact and then they cut away from it.
Yeah.
And this actually worked, in which like people still saw the impact, but they were more accepting of it. So basically they find like a way to show extreme violence, but in a way that's acceptable for people to show. And it's like this sort of, it's a very objective, clinical and sanitized way of showing extreme violence. And we wanted to really not do that. Like, we didn't want this extreme violence to be free to watch, like to be easy to watch. We wanted, that people would be in this vlog style directly spoken to by the girls, that you are sort of in it with them. And that's it.
It's funny because there was, out of the two films that were at the festival, right? There was two films at the festival, and your one and another one from Russia that was also excellent, but they had a somewhat similar subject matter. The other one was about people who inevitably end up viewing a horrible incident through live broadcast on a phone. But that one was quite stylistic, and it was although it's very well done and it's excellent, you feel very much like you're watching a film that has a point. While with the spectacle, you're not quite sure where, and it gradually eases you into it, but you're never really sure after a while if what you're watching is real or fake. And I mean, with the audience who watched it at our thing, you could hear a pin drop in the room. You could feel collectively the oxygen pulled out of the room because people were becoming more and more increasingly uncomfortable. One of the reasons I love screening films like that, one of the reasons I love film festivals in particular, is because oftentimes as an audience, like with most things, you'll actively create kind of there's things you consume normally tend to reflect your comfort level. So you'll actively surround yourself with, and things like Netflix sort of help this, where the algorithm pushes you films that will, match things that you've watched already. So generally a film festival like the one I run is an opportunity to force people out of their comfort zone to watch things that they mightn't necessarily watch. So screening your film
was eye-opening, because a lot of times it made a lot of people really uncomfortable. So I think I sent you an email about this, essentially to give you an anecdote from the festival. After a few minutes, I was outside and somebody wandered out after maybe 3 minutes of your movie, and they came up to me and they said, why would you, and this is an interesting debate, I maybe you'll find interesting. They said, why would you show a film like that? And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, why would you show a film like that? I mean, what's the point of that? And I said, well, how far did you get into the movie? And they were like, well, I left after it just began. And I was like, well, did you stay till the end? And I said, well, no, if you stayed to the end, you would have seen the point. And they said, well, I still don't understand. It's too realistic. It feels too much like real life. Why would you show it? And I said, well, we're having this conversation, and I think that's the value in it. And that's the value in really good art, is that it prompts a conversation. So we then proceeded to have a conversation about how that film would impact, and would it affect somebody and would it not? And I found that I needed to show a film like that because I needed to put that in front of audience members. Now, that was one person who came out and they said, you know what, they found it quite uncomfortable. Other people in there thought it was one of the greatest things I'd ever seen. Particularly a friend of mine who watched it, he was a volunteer at the festival, said when it cuts to the end, it's really eye-opening and it's really, really impactful. Another guy I know who runs a film festival said it was one of the most kind of harrowing but amazing things he'd ever seen. And he thought there was absolute value to viewing something like that. So I just think it was interesting because it is quite an uncomfortable experience and people react to it differently. But I don't know about you, but I'm assuming you do because you've made it. But I see real value in making something like that and screening something like that to an audience. Have you gotten any sort of reactions from anybody who watched it, or has anyone come back and said, you know, that was too much or too little, or what's your feedback so far?
Well, we've been in some film festivals where we were actually in the audience, and we had like a similar experience where when the film starts, sort of the first 2 minutes sort of ease you in. So people are quite, you have some people who are still laughing. They think the girls are quite funny. And then when it really kicks off, then it's silence in the room, and you really feel this sort of atmosphere in the room. And I know that but there's a difficulty, I guess, for film festivals sometimes, and also for this film to find its way to festivals. I've heard a lot from programmators that they have difficulties to find, like, where do we put this exactly, this film? And
often in film festival, when they like the film, they have to build a block around it because they believe that you cannot put this film in between comedies or something like that. So they, the last recently two film festivals, they did it to construct a thematic around the film to make it like more apparent that it has a point.
Because
I programmed it slightly like that. I eased people into it. I didn't ram it between two comedies, but I eased people into it with two shorts before. Then I had that, and then I had a lighthearted thing straight after that to kind of recalibrate people a little bit. And not a comedy, like a lighthearted documentary, and just something about local people and a project. And I just put something in there to I didn't want to put a comedy straight in afterwards because I felt that would have been very odd. But I put in kind of a sort of a light documentary in order to kind of ease people out of it. But have you had anyone push back saying, "Oh, I really like it, but I can't program it"?
Well, I don't know. I've heard some people who said like I'd like to program it, but I have to see if I got other films that can fit into this, and if not, then I cannot program it for the festival. So we had something like that.
It's funny. It's a funny system. I mean, one of the conversations I had with the example of this person afterwards was a little bit like along the. It's a funny world because as a festival director, I shouldn't really. I mean, I'll give you an example. Okay, when I was in film school, a bit like yourself, you're saying you had to make 2 films a semester, and I made a film, and it was a dark comedy based somewhat similar, not similar, but it was based on a true story I'd read that happened in Cyprus, I think. about a man who was trying to frighten his wife, pretending that he hung himself, and he accidentally killed himself in the process. Now, I had wanted to make something along this line. The one I made was a much broader comedy that took that idea and expanded on it, and I turned it into it was about autoerotic asphyxiation, and it was a dark comedy about a guy who accidentally kills himself through autoerotic asphyxiation. So when I was making that film, I was told that festivals wouldn't screen it because they tend to shy away from content like that. So I ended up kind of diluting my story and changing it a lot. In hindsight now, I wouldn't have done this, but at the time I did it based on what I was told. But I think it's a funny experience because how do I put this? I shouldn't really be in a position to be a gatekeeper to what an audience sees or not. And you've gone to the effort of making something and crafting something that has a point and has impact. And then it comes to somebody like me and a team of judges, and we say, well, this film is technically really well made. It's very, very interesting, but I don't think I can show this to an audience. And I think that's kind of a weird scenario, because the criteria for our festival is that it just has to be innovative, well made, innovative and use that technology. And your film kind of fit that criteria. So I'm in a position where I'm like, well, I want to show it, and I think there's value to an audience seeing it. Who am I to decide whether an audience can kind of handle that or not? I'm best to just show it and then deal with that feedback. And when I showed your film, the feedback was split down the middle. Some people found it uncomfortable. Some people found it a value to seeing it. And to me, I suppose it comes into a sort of a censorship thing where somebody was basically saying to me, why would you program something like that? And I'm saying, well, why wouldn't I program something like that? Who am I to decide how that is programmed? You know what I mean? You've gone to the effort of making it. I need to facilitate you to show it to an audience, whether or not an audience necessarily wants to see it or not. But the value of a film festival to me is that it's a broad spectrum of things that are viewed by everybody who's in the audience, and they may not like everything, but it's a mixed bag of things that they get to see. So it's just an interesting conversation. I was just wondering, was it something that you had dealt with, or because it's quite harrowing and it's quite violent and it makes people quite uncomfortable, but at the same time, it's very well made and it's very realistic, and it's a really good use of I think what you set out to do in terms of dragging the audience into it is done very, very well. And I think that there's value to that. And I think there's a value to an audience seeing that. And it's something I will never forget. One of the things I won't forget from any of my festivals. But I was just curious, was that something that you've kind of dealt with? But you're saying that you are getting some feedback on that. Fustine, from an editing perspective, how was it to edit it together? How was it to put it together to maintain that sort of slow rhythm and pace and dread that builds its way up? Because you have to drag the audience in.
Yeah. Well, the editing process took different stages. First, we worked on like putting together all the takes, because the film was entirely shot in plan séquence, you know, where you had the girls performing each scene multiple times.
Yeah.
And when we would construct the whole skeleton, it would be around like 40 minutes. And of course, it was really heavy to watch. Like it was really lacking some how do you say,
levity,
it was too much real time, you know. So rhythm was there to be found, and then we started to cut and to basically go back to the screenplay intention and Ivo's intention to make everything come into a form that would really express this vlog style and the gradually the violence that gradually comes in this staging of their life. And this was done by always having in the back of the head this limit that was very thin between being exploitative, or not. Like how do we make this point come across that we play on a very narrow line, but at the same time we want to convey a very strong message about the society of entertainment and how far it can disconnect us from reality. And so this was the whole challenge of this editing, because it couldn't be only about being realistic. You see, it had to be also conveying this layer of point of view about the image culture of nowadays. So it was very subtle cuts that we had to do, and subtle change of scenes. Sometimes we inverted what was originally written in order to, editing was really a big part of writing the movie in the end. And but it was only to make all the intentions more powerful in a way.
So I assume that you had I assume when you say the initial cut is 40 minutes, you had an element of it. There was a lot more to it. It was a lot more in the sense that there was much more in the way of build-up, or much more in the way of torture, or what way did you decide what stayed in and what left? Like what kind of stuff did you leave on the cutting room floor, I suppose?
Well, I think where the 40 minute comes from is specifically from the way that we shot, because originally we had this idea to, like very early in the process of the film, we had this idea to maybe shoot some with traditional cinema cameras.
Yeah.
But we wanted to go fully for this idea of having everything in the smartphone and in this vlog style. And that actually freed up quite a lot of things for us in terms of, like, now we didn't have to have necessarily a DOP on set. We still had a DOP who did a lot of work for the film, but we wanted the actresses to actually hold the camera themselves, because we have some of these, like for instance, you have this film, The Visit by M. Night Shyamalan, which is a film that is supposed to be filmed by the characters themselves on an old camera, but everything is in 4K quality, and the camera movements are always perfectly smooth, even if they're a little running away.
And it seems very, with that film, it seems like it's very much a gimmick that they drop relatively quickly, and why they insist on sort of trying to stick to the rules when clearly they're not visually makes. Go ahead. Sorry, go on.
So that's something like we really had this idea then. No, if we're going to go for the smartphone, then we also want the actresses to hold the camera themselves. So they were operating the camera. We had the DOP. He would put like the ISO settings on the phone, and then he would get out. And we also had lighting and microphones hidden in the room. So there was actually nobody of the crew had to be on set. So we just got everybody out. The whole film basically more or less placed in one single room. So what we did is, in the beginning, we set up the scene, and then everybody went out, and then the three actresses, they played the entire scene from beginning to end, and they had 360 freedom to turn the camera wherever they wanted.
Yeah.
And specifically in the first take that we would do, we would give very little directions, and they could just do what they wanted. And then after that, we would look at it and go a bit like, maybe it would be nice if you would frame this in the camera and things like that. But what I think we had then is that, every time it would be like the full scene. And so when we started with the editing, what we had was just, I think the film is in total like 8 scenes, and we had these full 8 scenes back to back, and that was the 40 minutes that we had. So there was really not a lot of cutting going on already on set, so to speak.
So that's kind of that's a lot of incredible faith in your performers as well, because you're essentially leaving the room and assuming it's going according to plan, and then go back in. So that could if that backfired, you'd be there for days on end trying to get it right. But where did you source because the performers are amazing, and they kind of add to the realism of this. They never strike a sort of artificial note once in the entire thing. Were these like local actors that you cast?
So the two main characters were from a school, like a high school that specializes in drama and acting in Belgium. so I went to see a performance of them there, and then we got to talk, and they agreed to do the film. And then the actress who plays the woman who is being murdered, I sent a screenplay to her, and she was really into it. I've often what we have is that the two main actresses, the younger girls, get a lot of the praise of the film because they play a lot of they are a lot on the screen. But I think also the Joan, the woman who plays the older woman who's getting murdered, she also should get a lot of praise for what she did, because I think it's a really difficult role to play, and to just like it's kind of even emotionally heavy to play that on set.
And she's excellent because she doesn't have a whole heap to say, but she sells it a lot with her actions or reactions, or the look in her face, or her movements, or the way she sits in her chair and everything. It tells you a whole kind of story about her. And she becomes an incredibly interesting character, and she genuinely seems like somebody you would see wandering down the street. Like she seems like a real person. And her body, her mannerisms and everything tell you much more of a story than kind of a backstory ever would. So there's real kind of, when things start to spiral out of control, she feels very much like a human being who's having this happen to her, not just some sort of kind of prop that's out there, for the entire movie. But no, it's just fascinating. And you shot it all in one night, yeah?
We shot it over 5 days.
Oh, okay, cool. That's cool. It's an incredible process to kind of gear up your performers, and then let your performance kind of do everything and then you have to come back and then oversee what they've done and give them notes. So it's incredible kind of trust in your actors and things like that. But so, sorry, go on.
So how we did it, we did have so we shot on an iPhone, I think the iPhone 7, and we used this, how was the program called? It's Movie Pro app that we used for it, and there you can there you have like a sort of a remote thing, so we could screen mirror on another iPhone, and then that iPhone was connected to a monitor, so I could still see what was going on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought you were just closing the door and saying, okay, see you in 5 minutes, and then you burst back in, and then you have to rewatch all the takes and be like, oh, well, okay, do this differently. No, that's pretty interesting. So now that the spectacle's done and you're running the festival circuits, what's next for you? You just sticking to your day job, or have you got any other ideas for the Perriers? Like what's on the slate for the Perriers next?
So I've been working slowly, I would say, on a new project. I've been also with the spectacle largely came from sort of this internet culture of the reaction videos and looking at these kind of like gruesome things online. And now I've put my focus more on like extreme right or alt-right culture online.
Okay, cool.
Idea of how using memes are used by them to make extreme right ideas more like fashionable again. And so that's a project I'm working on at the moment.
Wow. And is that going to be filmed on a phone again, or do you think you'll use cameras, or what way are you going to approach that?
At the moment, we haven't gotten a full idea yet. I think it's going to be filmed more like as a documentary. It's still a fiction film, but we want to sort of mimic the style of a documentary. So I do think it's not going to be with smartphones for the moment, at least.
Yeah. No, that sounds really, really cool. And Fustine, what's on the slate for you? Will you be working on this project, or are you editing things as you go at the moment?
For the moment, I am busy with the editings. I also help Ivo with the next film.
Mm-hmm.
And usually he involves me a lot already from the writing process. So I can follow for even though it's gonna be a long journey, I follow the process going on before the editing.
Okay.
And I am also directing my documentary at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. What's that about?
It's a documentary about the family footage that I inherited from my father, who is a filmmaker. So he filmed a lot my childhood in a way that everything looked a bit staged and happy and perfect. And in all this huge quantity of footage that goes through the first 10 years of my life, I am interested in making a film where I try to discover a reality that I feel that is behind it, which is the portrait of my mother, who somehow detached herself from this happy family portrait because she had a lot of struggle to conform to her role as a mother. And so I try to make the portrait of my mother with the embellished footage filmed by my father, if you see the idea.
That's really interesting, and it must be very interesting to edit as well, to go back and to play through these things and to play off kind of your memories of events versus the staged, I'm using air quotes, reality that your father had created through video. There's a whole interesting topic there about reality versus fiction and your memories and particularly around the idea of, you'll see now. I find it interesting because I was involved in a debate once about computational photography, and they were talking about, like when you take a photo now on your phone and your phone uses the phone will automatically edit your picture in camera. And there's a whole kind of idea about that, a bit like, 15 years from now, when you look back at pictures of your life, will you be looking at a picture of you, or will you be looking at a machine's best version of what you look like, and how that will affect your memories and things like that? So I just find that whole kind of process the whole kind of idea of fiction versus reality based on video and photography very interesting. So it sounds like it's going to be a really fascinating documentary to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see it as well.
Yeah. Well, you have to sit and watch all this footage. So, but it must be nice it must be nice to edit something you're in for a change, as opposed to editing other people's stuff.
Yes, but it's also very necessary to work with I can work by myself, but at a certain point it's necessary to work with an editor. Yeah. Because the external vision and the synthetic mind are like the right distance.
You're too involved in a project like that. It's nice to get a second opinion that can kind of be a little bit more detached and tell you what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
But even that's a story in itself, because you're looking at your memories, trying to decide what's valuable to you, and then you have someone come in to say, well, this isn't valuable and this isn't valuable, and why those memories are valuable to you in that story. Anyway, it's a snake eating its own tail that could go on for
Exactly.
But anyway, listen, I'll leave you guys get back to sweet isolation, which I'm assuming you're in, like all the rest of us. But best of luck and keep busy and stay safe, guys. And I will speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no worries.
So that's it from our chat with Ivo and Fustine. I hope you all enjoyed it. If anyone wants to check out The Spectacle now, they can on, if you look up on YouTube, if you look MFIF 2020, Best Feature, you will get a link to The Spectacle on the Mobile Filmmakers YouTube channel, and be sure to check it out because it is absolutely phenomenal. It's as we mentioned in the podcast, it is powerful stuff and makes for uncomfortable viewing, but I recommend it's something that you should watch because it really is eye-opening stuff and it is premium filmmaking on a mobile device. So I hope everyone is staying safe, and talk to you soon. All right, bye.